Oh my God, you guys, welcome to Andrea Lake 101 Secrets of the Apprentice. This is a two-parter and this is part two. So if you're dropping in with us this lovely Friday and you clicked on this because it's the most recent episode, you guys, I did you a solid. And this is part two for today. So go back and watch episode 34, which also just dropped with episode 35. Both are Secrets of the Apprentice, and this is the end of the finale. So this is part two of the finale of season 5, my season of The Apprentice. So where I left you off at the end of part one of the finale was exactly where the show itself left us off. If you want to actually watch my season of The Apprentice, season 5, it is currently airing on Amazon Prime. Season 5 of The Apprentice, starring moi. So we're on the final task. We're doing a concert with the Bare Naked Ladies. I am sleeping in this disgustingly smoke-filled hotel. I think any area in the world where cigarette smoking is allowed in an enclosed space is just fucking gross to me. And so that casino certainly was no exception. It is like the worst scent pollution that you can do. Just filling a place with lots of perfume, lots of cologne, and lots of cigarette smoke. So I wake up in my hotel room. I am coughing up blood, big, huge, like a lot, like clots of blood. I am shook, as one would be. I rush down. I quickly just like throw on clothes, rush down to the production crew and explain what has happened. They're like, you have to go. Like, are you okay? They're asking me these questions. They are not concerned. They seem like annoyed. I am really stoic as a person. So when I convey information, sometimes it doesn't convey the seriousness of it because I always seem like I have my shit too fucking together and in line. So if I am, for example, in an almost intolerable amount of pain, I will be like, yeah, this is really bad. I have really bad pain. Like I need to go to the ER right now. And I'll say it pretty much exactly like that. In this case, I am panicked because I have just coughed up multiple coughs of blood. And I'm like, what the fuck is happening? Like I'm coughing and then I'm bringing up blood. And they're like, well, you have to go tell Sean that you have to leave, because I did have to leave to go to a doctor. Luckily, they found me somebody relatively quickly who ran some basic like x-rays and different things and came to the conclusion that because my sinuses were super dried out by all the recirculated air and then breathing in all the cigarette smoke in a casino, like that's not how I usually would live. I had had a nosebleed while I was asleep and swallowed the blood, and then it was coming back up. So on the scale of things, incredibly not serious. Like for all the reasons that somebody could be coughing up blood, this was a totally profoundly not serious reason on the scale of life. But it was terrifying. I was so relieved, and they're like, we don't know what this is. We might have to send you in for XYZ, different extensive scanning. But the cameras are there with me, and I'm like, could you guys like not? I don't know what they're going to say next. Can we not make this a plot point? Like, I am terrified right now. But they didn't care. And so they did make it a plot point. So long story short, I am gone for about 3 or 4 hours. And this is the important story that I want to tell. I literally made Jay Beanstalk, the executive producer of The Apprentice, a moral compass to give it to him at the season finale of The Apprentice because of this. However, to be honest, Jay probably didn't edit this episode himself, and I, in fact, did not give him a moral compass. Although I was like so mad because of this. I understand that this is a television show. I understand that they're going to create whatever plot points that they create, that lots of drama and intrigue and someone potentially being very sick apparently makes for good television. I do not watch television at the time. I'm already so very happy to be over this. And honestly, this episode is not about me. This episode is a season finale episode. It is about Lee and Sean. So remember when I say like everyone gets their final episode, like the episode you're fired is like your episode? Well, the episode where they are the finalists is like their episode. Except for that a lot of it did center around me because I have main character energy. And so as it was like coming up and being edited and being filmed and being clipped, my grandpa Joe, rest in peace, was watching The Apprentice. And there was not a lot that we could do to sort of make him really understand, like, this isn't happening this week. This already happened. And I know that I told him that, but I know that he sort of wasn't getting it because he was asking in real time. I don't remember if it was to my mom or to one of my aunts, like asking questions as if I was in New York right now doing this thing. And he was really coherent. He was a very smart guy, but for some reason, that part wasn't necessarily tracking with him. And so I called one of the producers, that same producer, Leah, and I said, hey, can you just tell me if this is going to make the final cut of the episode? Because I want to warn my grandfather if he is going to see that, like, I am coughing up blood on this episode. I want to warn him that that's going to happen and that I am totally okay. But I don't even want to tell him that that's happened if it's not going to make the air, because it would just be unnecessarily concerning, seeing the actual underlying medical thing was like barely even a medical thing. I just had a nosebleed, swallowed it while I was sleeping. It came up when I woke up. I didn't even have to take medication or anything for it. They advised that I no longer sleep in the hotel where all the cigarette smoke and recirculated air was, because my sinuses were really dry. Maybe they gave me a nasal spray. I don't remember. And anyway, the producer is like, no, it's not going to be on there. It's not going to be on there at all. And then it's the cliffhanger and they make it look like I'm going to die. And I'm like, you fucking guys, are you serious? My poor grandfather, rest in peace, who actually did die of a heart attack. Like, is frantically calling my mom or my aunts. I don't remember who he called. Maybe he called Beth, my aunt. I don't remember who he called. And he's like, no, whoever he did call was like, no, it's fine. And he couldn't get through to somebody for a little while. Maybe it was my mom. And once he did get through, no, she's fine. This is like 6 months ago. It was nothing, but they themselves didn't know what happened because they didn't tell anybody what happened, because it should never have made the air. And I was very specifically told that it would not make the air. They did not tell me anything about the food poisoning allegations, which, believe you fucking me, I asked every person that I knew in production if they were putting that in, because I to this day can't believe that they didn't put in the food poisoning allegations, because it would have made good television, but they didn't. And I can't believe that they put in the thing about me coughing up blood, but like, I guess it made it was, our team was running legitimately pretty flawlessly. So the thing that they were picking on us for was like that we weren't getting enough for the fundraising items related, like maybe there wasn't enough branding or whatever, but they were giving us the branding assets. And then they were the ones that were populating the VIPs in our VIP section. And the VIPs were not very VIP. They didn't have a lot of cash. They didn't just have like 10 grand extra to do extra stuff, or at least they weren't bidding like they were super wealthy people. And so there wasn't much to be like, oh my God, this looks like it might be close. Because when I saw the other teams, what they put together in 36 hours, of course, as I mentioned in the previous episode, it's just going to be edited to make it look like one team really shit the bed. And they had a very hard task. They had to like engage an audience in a hockey rink over on the other team, over on Gold Rush, on Lee's team. They were like in this cold hockey rink doing almost, I think it was like a halftime, mid-time show thing, and trying to get like interaction back and forth with the audience. And there's barriers of like the plexiglass, and it's just not, it doesn't feel up close and personal. And then a very big deal was made about it, where there was like no VIP section for them to sit in. There was nothing special about it. And a couple other things that were made into this really huge storyline. But honestly, anybody pulling off an event like that in like 36 or 48 hours or whatever it is, whatever very small, teeny tiny little itty bitty window of time that was available to us to pull off this really quite massive activation, like to do a whole concert for a big ass fucking famous band, that is not something that you can usually just whip together in like 2 days at a big venue with a lot of moving parts. Plus we had to orchestrate a raffle and a fundraiser and manage every different moving part component of it. And as I mentioned and keep mentioning and will continuously mention, It's why I was so very much like, I need a super strong chief operations officer because nothing in a business gets done without operations. I can have 100 good ideas. Anybody can have 100 good ideas. Recently, I've been seeing some really interesting stuff about Elon Musk online, like on TikTok or Instagram or whatever, where people are like, well, he's not really that smart because he didn't create any of the ideas of the businesses that he scaled. He didn't create the original Tesla. He bought this from somebody else, or he didn't create the original whatever. He bought this from someone else. And I'm like, okay, that doesn't mean that he's not incredibly strategic and very, very smart. 99.999% of people cannot scale something into an actual humongous company. 99.99% of people, if you throw them in to put together a concert in 36 hours, they have no idea of the logistical organization that you're going to need to do that. And then multiply that out, of course, by any billion-dollar company that Elon has built. Elon and I couldn't be further apart on politics. I don't know that guy. We know a lot of the same people, but I don't know him. And I would reserve my judgment on a human being until I met them. But when people are like, well, he's not that smart, I'm like, that's just completely fucking ridiculous. That's absurd. That is an absurd premise to start with. You do not roll out multiple billion-dollar companies without being incredibly strategic, have long-term thinking and planning, be very smart, be capable of recruiting around you a top team, be capable of recruiting around you and retaining a C team. I know members of his C teams. Keeping your upper staff happy, then trickling that down and keeping all of your middle management and working staff just super, super happy and engaged and with a purpose and on a mission. And so a lot of times the person that has that original litmus for an idea, they maybe aren't the same person that's going to be able to scale that into a multiple billion-dollar company, because the execution of that is a skill set on its own. And in a smaller degree than that, any business that you're looking at, if you don't have a bright, shiny CEO who is doing their part to form strategic partnerships and alliances, make sure everybody is cohesive and staying on board, make sure everybody is getting along, make sure that everyone has this clear, singular vision for what you're creating, and then also a person in an operational position who's going to make sure that all of the moving parts get handled with excellence. It is that same thing that I've talked about a number of times before, where like, if you do not have this thing done by 6 a.m., then this thing, it's not capable for it to be done by 10 a.m. Or if you do not have this thing done by 6 a.m., you are completely fucked at 7:30 p.m. because that concert is not going to happen. And there's so much like that on any business, especially during a project or an activation where there's going to be a live event, because then you have an audience coming. The show needs to start at a certain time. The VIP section needs to be set up by over here. You need to engage with the wait staff who's going to be waiting on the VIP section. You need to properly train them on what to say, on what to bring, on what the offerings should be. There's just like endless moving parts. It wasn't just the rider. When we were getting the rider together for the Bare Naked Ladies, it was making sure that they understood what the route was from their bedroom to backstage in a way that they could go down the service elevators and not the main elevators. So they wouldn't get stopped by their fans on the way to the show in a way that might be uncomfortable if they get mobbed like before the show. So there's just a million little steps that you have to put in place with any project. It's no different than when we did the Pride booth and you have, 127 things to keep in order. Well, if you don't have Jenny running that particular Pride booth or anything in Sticker Junkie, if you don't have Brian running all of our operations and making sure everything over here, not just that we started to work on getting it done, but that it actually got completed and that we're queued up for the next step because of what got done 6 days ago. So basically, I don't know who was doing that over on Gold Rush, probably either Pepe or Teresa, but to my understanding, they did not have the benefit of having created something over there like I created for me. I know they tried to create something because we were talking about our spreadsheet so much. And I did find out that the spreadsheet actually made it into the finale episode, because when I tell you it is the reason that we won all of the tasks on Synergy, there is no hyperbole there. And so if any other contestant were to say, no, that's not true, and Andrea is just trying to take all the credit, what it actually means is that they do not understand how businesses run or how projects function or how anything gets done. Even if they were saying that in the moment out of hubris or just being new into business, there's no way that after they've had a whole long career that they don't understand that operations is the reason that things get done. Like there's a reason that, I mean, whoo, what happened with Victoria's Secret? Nay, nay, my friends. Why do all those guys always turn out like that? Good question. But Victoria's Secret, very famous story. I think his name is Les Wexler, purchased Victoria's Secret from the original founder for like $4 million and then built it into this huge monolithic juggernaut of an empire along with Express and several other clothing lines that he created. And then turned out to be quite problematic. You can watch the documentary. I think it's on Netflix. So again, this shows up time and time and time again in a show like The Apprentice, where everybody's clamoring to say, I did this and I did this and I did this. But in business, it's the execution that matters. So like the guy that sold Victoria's Secret had tons of regrets because he, air quotes, sold $1 billion brand. Well, it wouldn't have been $1 billion brand if you didn't have somebody come in who understood how to scale. Scaling is an incredibly difficult skill set to learn, and you learn it by doing it. I keep seeing like all those courses where people are like, I'm going to show you how to build $1 million empire. And I'm like, okay, well, you have to have done $1 million empire in order to teach somebody how to do a multi-million dollar empire. Like you can't teach unless you know. And I'm not talking about those fucking courses where people sell courses on how to sell courses. I'm talking about courses where I keep seeing people like who are legitimately just not entrepreneurs being like, I am going to teach you how to be an entrepreneur. And I'm like, good luck with that. I hope that goes well for you. My strong advice is that you learn entrepreneurship from an entrepreneur whose brands you have heard of before, not somebody you've never heard of until you just like see that one course. Wild. So in the same way, I'm sure that over on the opposite team on Gold Rush, which was the name of Lee's team, that they had really great ideas, but then the execution just wasn't there. And so things kept falling apart because they didn't have the tightness of like, in order to get this launched by right here, you have to have it done by right there. And in business, it's way different. It's more like if we want to hit our numbers in December, that means we have to have a bunch of stuff in place by August. But in a 36-hour task, like if a few hours get away from you, that really can be a problem, which is why it was so terrifying for Sean when I had to leave. And I was the one who knew every single working part and working order and like every gear that needed to turn by right here in order for stuff to happen properly over there. And losing 3 or 4 hours or however long it took for me to go to the doctor really was a big deal. But luckily, it was on the spreadsheet. So Tarek probably was the one that would have jumped in and just made sure that we kept banging through the spreadsheet, while Sean honestly just had to be distracted. He was shooting a TV show. He was doing the right thing by spending as much time as he could with Donald and the other judges and showing people around and being bright and shiny. That is the job of a CEO. As a CEO, there certainly are times where you're getting in there and you're rolling up your sleeve and you're engaging your team. But as a CEO, when you're interfacing with your main client, you're the one interfacing with your main client. When I go to meet with one of my Fortune 500s, I am the person in that meeting with my Fortune 500. Just shooting the shit, engaging with them, asking them if there's anything that we can help them with, showing them what we're doing that's bright and shiny. And so did Sean win that task? Yes, of course Sean won that task. Sean obviously won that task because I was running operations for him. It's why whenever I talk about Sticker Junkie and what we're building, I'm always like, Brian Burling, our Chief Operations Officer, Brian Burling, our Chief Operations Officer. We also have a chief of product. We also have a chief of staff. We also have our general counsel. We have a team of people who is working to make sure everything is cohesive within that company. And then we have our other managers. We have an organizational manager. We have a manager of the graphic designs. We have a creative director. We have a head of production. We have a night manager of production who is the second in command of production, who is also our lead mechanic. We have our office manager. Like we have all of our staff tight and in line with a really strong understanding of their roles. And it just didn't appear to me like the other team had that type of organizational structure basically ever. It didn't appear to me like anyone on that team sort of really understood and was a serial entrepreneur. There were a couple of like entrepreneurs who ran projects, but there wasn't someone that was just like a power hitter, multiple companies under their belt, tons of organization within my own companies, multiple companies running at the same time that were doing millions of dollars in revenue each. Like that's just a skill set that if you haven't done that, you don't know how to do that. And you're not going to learn real fucking quick like on the fly on a 36-hour task. I mean, there's going to be tons of takeaways that I'm sure would help anybody forever whenever they do stuff like that. But it was hard even to punch holes in what we were doing as a plot point, which is why I think the doctor thing got moved in the first place into the episode, because normally you would have failure after failure after failure after failure on both teams equally in a inundation by fire task like that. And we just didn't, because I do shit like this all the time. This truly, truly, truly was like a game for me, like a board game or like a role-playing game or just like some fun game that was literally just made just for me. So it was so fun for me. So when little challenges would come up and they would pull out the rug under something or give us some stupid fucking rider or take away my shotguns that I was skeet shooting with in the park or whatever, I'd be like, oh. And then in the next second, I would be like, all right, well, we're just going to do this. Hey, does this work? Hey, do we have this? Hey, can you talk to somebody and see if we have that? What's the most dazzling interface that we could have with Donald when he comes in to the charity auction? So I remember like setting people up with, and I knew that he didn't drink, so I would always have alcohol and non-alcohol because I didn't drink then, but setting people up with like champagne so that you get a glass of champagne when you went into the raffle area part. So we execute the concert. The concert is flawless. The guys are fantastic. I mean, the Bare and Naked Ladies are a crowd-pleasing act. So they do their very short concert. I think it was like 4 or 5 or 6 songs or something. It was really just for TV, but they did populate it with all the people in the casino. So basically, I thought that like a bunch of their fans were going to come. No. It was just like this free Bare Naked Ladies concert for The Apprentice that just like they grabbed a bunch of extras in the casino and let them go in. And I think a lot of the staff were the ones sitting in the seats. And then immediately after the concert, we went up and did the raffle, which, like I said, I don't even remember, you guys. You can watch the episode, but I don't even know if it made the air, that I got Quincy Jones's team to agree to do a meet and greet private lunch at his estate. It like what? And I think I negotiated like 3 or 4 more raffle prizes like that. I think I got the tour manager for like the Bare Naked Ladies to give something to the raffle, and I don't even remember what else, but it was like a whole series of high-end raffle gifts, like nice raffle gifts, like things that people would actually bid on in a raffle, because my assumption was that they were going to bring in like a bunch of, Trump's friends, a bunch of just like really rich New Yorkers who might want to see an inside peek on what the filming of The Apprentice looks like or something. But nay, my friends, that is not who is there. When I was literally talking to people, it was just like employees of the hotel that didn't have 20 grand to bid on something. Then they were raffling off a car, and it was like, I think it was like one of the car dealers actually who bought the car. I don't recall, but there weren't people in the room that could just like comfortably be like, oh yeah, 40 grand or 50 grand or whatever it was. And I remember one of the points of things was like that we didn't get the right people to go into the raffle, but that is not how it was set up. Like it was supposed to be that people were coming to the raffle. So anyway, I don't know if there were similar issues on the other side, although I believe that the other team was fundraising for the New York Fire Department, which quite frankly is an easier thing to fundraise for. I don't remember what we were fundraising for, but we were in New York, and so that would be an easy thing to fundraise for, especially back in 2005. So anyhow, don't really remember what happened there, just that it went off basically without a hitch. And so because of that, and they were looking for the drama, they ended up using me going to the hospital, and that was terrible. So when I'm coming back from the hospital, that's when it was like the doctor's office. It wasn't an official hospital. That's when that producer pulled me aside. I know that I told this story on a previous episode, but she pulled me aside and was like, well, I'm really sorry you were fired. You're so good at this. Like, it just should have been you. You just should have won. Because she was really used to people being really disappointed and being incredibly upset and being like literally like having breakdowns when they're at the Ponderosa. And I'm like, it's cool. Wouldn't even change my life. She's like, what the fuck are you talking about? Because like Sham went on and became some kind of a judge on the Miss Universe pageant or whatever. And I'm like, yeah, but that's not what I would do. Like, I didn't even understand that that was an option. I only would have gone and built a building. That is not sexy. Nobody would have come to film and record that unless I generated the press myself. I could recede directly back into privacy with no problem whatsoever if I would have won that show, because I would have just gone and basically traded the use of my brain for a year in exchange for a PhD in commercial construction, which I absolutely wanted to do. That would have been fascinating, to be the second in command on a big commercial project, and I would have been the CEO. And so they would have thought, the people on the construction site truly would have thought that that was like an in-name only title, because how the fuck would I know how to be the CEO of a construction site? But I know how to be a CEO. I know how to lead a team. I've done it a million times. Like, I know what to do there. And so I would have performed much better than anyone was anticipating, and I would consistently have deferred to the chief operations officer, who nobody is confused on a construction site as to who is actually running the organization itself in a really large scale building like that. The CEO is setting up the financing and taking the meetings and putting together different strategic partnerships and using strategic contractors and subcontractors and shepherding through the process. But you have tons of compliance officers and tons of other people who are doing a lot of the actual work. And as the CEO, you're keeping your investors happy and you're making sure that things line up. But it's your chief operations officer who is going to go do the nitty gritty, get her done kind of stuff. So I am performing that role perfecto-ly for Sean. So we win by a lot. I couldn't even have been close, and not even knowing what the other team had done yet or seen a peek into what the other team had done yet. It's just absurd to think that somebody that didn't have at the time, like, I had 15 years at that point of running operations, running teams, because in my companies, when they were starting out, I was the chief operations officer and the chief executive officer both. I never had a proper chief operations officer in any of my companies until Brian came along. I had some people that I was working with on projects where we would start out, but none of those companies really ever flourished hugely. And so in all of my companies that were multi-million dollar companies, I was the CEO and chief operations officer both. And so while it is not the thing that I'm the best at, it's certainly something I'm really, really competent at. But man, what a difference it makes in Sticker Junkie having a true, actual chief operations officer who keeps those ships running on time so that I don't got to worry about that part. And I just step in and do oversight and make sure that everything's getting done in all the different departments, make sure all the departments like each other, make sure everybody's talking to each other. But even that in Sticker Junkie falls a lot to Brian too, while I'm drilling down on sales and getting the books balanced. Off in the weeds, but welcome to your Friday episode. So I almost would feel like, wow, that's really impossible to compete against for the other team. And I didn't actually watch the finale episode until way, way later, because it was actually airing while we were at the theater prepping to cut the live portion where Donald would talk to the different contestants and be recapping the show. And so they were kind of showing the show. They were kind of showing clips from the show, but it wasn't like all of them. It was kind of disjointed. I think maybe the audience watched part of it while we were backstage or something. So I didn't really understand how it was edited until way later. And I was like, wow, that was a runaway train for Sean. And they did kind of try and make it look even, but I was like, wow, that's really hard. If you don't have a team that's going to be cohesive and get their ducks in a row, that's going to be a problem. And Sean and I always worked fantastically together, and Tarek and I worked fantastically together. And I think Tammy was just like right next to Sean, so she was working with him mostly. So I don't really remember working with her, but she and I were fine. And so the task ends. Sean did great, and then there is this insane period of time between when the show filmed and when it aired. And I know that I've addressed this on other episodes, but it was like 9 months. It was supposed to come out like 3 months later or something, or maybe 6 months later. And then it was 9 months. It might even have been a year. It might have been a year and a couple months later. I don't remember, but it was such an unexpectedly longer period of time than it normally is that I did hear from one of the people on production that I was staying in contact with. They're like, we don't even know if the show is going to make the air at this point. And I was like, oh, like that actually would have been okay with me, because the production staff, despite my asking many, many, many times, would not let me know whether or not the food poisoning allegations were going to make the air. And when I tell you that that was torture, that was fucking torture. That was terrible. And then I heard it wasn't going to make the air. Then I very quickly heard, no, it is. It's just pushed. It's delayed for this and this. It's no longer in the Thursday time slot. It's going to air, which we did not know was going to be the case. It's going to air over here instead in this much, much worse time spot. So fine. So it's going to air. So I've already gone through the whole thing of like watching myself be edited on the air. I got that stalker. That was terrifying. But at the same time, my businesses are up like 400%. And I can get a meeting with anybody I want. And then on the finale morning of The Apprentice, I get a phone call. Now, I know I told this story in another episode, but I do have to tell this story again because we're breaking out all of the different podcasts into separate podcasts. So your mind might be your own if you heard this story in a previous episode about making $442 million in t-shirt sales. So I'm in a hotel room with my ex-boyfriend and I get a phone call. So the operations officer over at Jinx, who is a company that I do business with, whose licensing rights I own for their video gaming t-shirts, calls me up and says, hey, we're too big for you now, and you can't own our licensing rights anymore because we just signed Blizzard Gaming. Now, don't worry, I'm going to tell a fast version of this story. If you want the whole story, go listen to the episode where I talk about making $442 million in t-shirt sales. So the fast version is, he says, we're too big for you now. We have to take our licensing rights back. I say, no. You have the licensing rights on Blizzard Gaming. How about if I retain the sales rights on your company, on everything for your company, including Blizzard Gaming? You tell me what price it is that you need to get, and I will pay my own commission. I will make sure that I get a higher enough price for you to cover my own cost of keeping my commissions on the table. They said, that sounds great. And as a matter of fact, I didn't just cover my commission. I was selling the t-shirt for about $1.85 more than they themselves would have been able to sell the t-shirt for, and I was getting a 70-cent commission. So it was working out great for everybody. I explained this math very quickly to their operations officer, and I said, they're going to chisel you down badly with pricing. They're very quickly going to be buying from you for less because they're going to offer to buy like 500,000 t-shirts from you. And you're not going to want to turn down that kind of cash. Keep me in the loop. And he said, that sounds great. Let's do it. Now, all of a sudden, I have the sales rights to Blizzard Gaming. I know that this is exciting. I am furiously Googling it because I don't fucking play that game. I never heard of that game. I never heard of Blizzard Gaming. I never heard of World of Warcraft. I don't own a TV, you guys. The degree to which I was out of touch with a lot of pop culture when I didn't own a TV was high, even though I was in a lot of spaces where I was integrated with pop culture. But like gaming, that was very new in 2004. MMOs, arguably, World of Warcraft was the first like mega popular MMO that sort of broke through in a computer gaming realm. It sort of feels to me like that's the way. I'm sure people would argue with that. I'm sure there were other ones, but this was like the first big one that also had a large monthly fee that you would be paying. So this is immediately a multi-billion-dollar company. And it is like a phenomenon with the people who are into it. So I immediately figure out what it is. My ex-boyfriend was in the room with me as soon as I hung up the phone. He's like, are you fucking kidding me? Did you just get the sales rights on Blizzard Gaming? I was like, I did. He's like, for what? I'm like, t-shirts, sweatshirts, patches, pins, hats, shoes, hoodies, beanies, backpacks, everything. We got almost all categories. He's like, what? Because his son played World of Warcraft. He's like, are you fucking kidding me, Andrea? So then I call up Hot Topic. I'm immediately on a conference call with several buyers from Hot Topic, and they're like, hold please. As soon as I told them that I had Blizzard Gaming, the vice president of the company comes on the phone and she's like, we have $4 million to spend with you for holiday. So on the morning of the live finale of The Apprentice, I am in the hotel room and I made $400,000 because I got a 10% commission. So I did a fucking phone call and made $4 million sale. Crazy, fucking cray cray. First time that's ever happened to me. And thankfully, not the last time. I would love a phone call like that again. I am telling you what, any big beverage company, call me. We have a whole bunch of stickers to sell you. Any big NFL team, sports team, let's fucking go. I am so here for it. We're reaching out to a ton of WNBA teams right now. We're reaching out to a ton of women's sports teams right now. Like, I love calls like that. And all big corporations use more stickers than you would possibly dream is true. So I had that call that morning and I go to the live finale. And it's just boring as fuck, to be honest. Like, they don't even call on me. I didn't want to stand up really for anyone. I was super over it with the whole process. I did not want to be there. I did not like being there. I know I sound like an asshole when I say that, but it's just the truth. So the finale finishes, Sean wins, and then we have an after party. I'm like, cool, I'm excited for because like they ended up randomly having a lot of extra tickets for the finale. And I misunderstood and I thought everybody got 8 tickets, but I guess everybody got like 4. So I did have 8 people show up because I lived in Southern California. So my friends just drove up from San Diego. So it's like my brother, one of my brother's best friends who I've known forever, my mom, my friend Deirdre. I don't even remember who else went. Maybe Justin. I don't remember who went, but a bunch of my friends came. Oh, right. Karen, this woman I worked with, and her sister Susan, who I had worked with for a little while when I was younger. Just like tons of people came to the season finale that I knew. Oh, my old office manager went. Like a bunch of my people went to the finale. It was super fun. We had this really fancy dinner before where I ran into Carolyn and I got to introduce her to my whole team because it was a lot of my staff that went. And then we're at the finale party, and I feel like everybody went to the finale party too, but I was just like wandering around because there's a bunch of fans there and there's a bunch of other people's family, and they have a lot of fan tickets. I mean, it was a couple thousand people that were there, and a lot of the production team, etc. And then, of course, like if you're on the production team for a Mark Burnett show, you get to go to every finale of every show. So if you have a +1 that you get to take with you, you're probably going to take the biggest fan of that show. So I'm just like talking to fans and having a great time. And when I tell you, because my mom was there, and I had run into Omarosa and I was talking to her. She's just like off at this quiet table. And I'm like, hey, how's it going? I don't own a TV. You're the only person from any Apprentice that I know who they are. And she's laughing and we're just talking. She's like, yeah, she had watched the show and said some nice things or whatever. And then we're just talking. And when I tell you, when my mom came up, I introduced my mom to Omarosa and then I left. 20 minutes later, Omarosa is still talking to my mom and they are laughing and giggling. And like, my mom is fucking fascinating. She's been to all 7 continents. She's just a total badass. But when I tell you, I watched Omarosa for the rest of that night interacting with her fans, and I just have the goosebumps. Literally the only person that I have seen be as nice to fans is Ed Sheeran. She is gracious and warm and welcoming and so lovely and so funny and so smart and so all of the things and so good with her fans, and basically was like, I saw the writing on the wall. I knew how my edit was going to go. And now I've made a whole career of this. And I'm like, bravo, well done. Original OG reality TV villain. Everyone should take a page from her book because she, in my experience of her, which is very limited, is cordial and kind and nice and lovely with her fans. Lovely with her fans. And then I'm just like wandering around and finishing out the night. And the guy that I was dating was there also. And we were exhausted because we're early birdies. Still to this day, I go to bed at like 9 o'clock and wake up at like 4 a.m. and kind of getting ready to get out of there. And I run in to go use the restroom. And this woman comes in and is like, oh my God, Andrea. I'm like, hey, how's it going? Like, washing my hands. She's like, my boss wants to meet you. And I'm like, okay, amazing. So like, who's your boss? She's like, oh, it's Jay from Microsoft. And I'm like, cool. Clearly, I have no idea who she's talking about. She goes, Jay Allard from Microsoft. And I go, great. Fucking don't know who that is. Why the fuck would I know who that is? Good question. Well, why the fuck I would know who it is was because he was one of the like guest people from one of the corporations on The Apprentice. Except for I already had been fired. It was like maybe he was on the episode after I got fired or something. And I was cracking up because I didn't watch the episodes I was not on. Why would I watch them? So I didn't know I don't really watch TV. So I didn't know what the task was. I didn't know anything about him. I didn't know that he was the guy leading the team that invented the Xbox. He's the head of the Xbox team. He was like number 3 in command to take over for Bill Gates at Microsoft at the time. No idea who he was. None, zero whatsoever, which Jay very quickly realized that I had no fucking clue who he was at all. So luckily for me, and I learned this from my dad, the guy never met a stranger. So my dad could instantly make anybody feel at ease, disarm them, make them feel comfortable, engage them in conversation, didn't really matter who they were, make them laugh, etc. And that is something that I learned from him. And sometimes, occasionally, especially when I was younger, when I was less comfortable with who I am, I get really awkward if I don't know what to say. It's almost like a panic because there was a component growing up where I sort of had to learn how to read other people and how to respond to other people. Like it didn't come quite as naturally for me as it did for other people. And I learned a ton over the years about psychology, about different, not only different reasons why that might be for me, but also different ways to just engage with people and connect more deeply with them in a really just authentic way and actually just really care about what their responses were, etc., in a way that will make people feel at ease. But small talk, not my jam. Diving deep, even in the middle of a conference, is a skill set that I really learned over the years of going to all these conferences and just realizing like, this is just kind of shitty. Networking sucks. Meeting people on the fly sucks. Having to make an impression, having to be on. And I have all of these little games that I play at conferences like hijacking that end up making people feel really at ease. But this is way back in 2004, and I'm with Jay, and he's some executive over at Microsoft, and I have no idea who he is. I have no idea that he's been on the show or was on the task. I didn't see it. And I don't know what to say to him next after he's like, hey, I've really been meaning to meet you. And I'm sure in his mind, he thinks, he's the fucking guy that's leading Xbox. Everybody wants to meet him at all times, and I have no idea who he is. And I go, so I'm immediately panicked because I don't know what to say next. And I can be really uncomfortable and I can make somebody really uncomfortable without saying anything just by feeling super awkward. And I know this about myself. This is far less true now than it was when I was in my early 30s. But so I'm like panicked because I don't know what to say next. And then I go, so what do you do at Microsoft? So Jay goes, oh, I'm at Xbox. And I go, oh, you're at Xbox. Like, do you know Blizzard Gaming? And he looks at me and he can't tell if I'm joking or not, right? Because he's been watching the show. He knows I have a dry sense of humor. I have already immediately made him laugh like 2 or 3 times the second that we start talking because I'm me. And he's saying very conciliatory, nice things to me of like, oh, I thought you were going to win the season. And I was like, you and me both, or fucking whatever. Just, whatever he said and whatever I said. Then, in the lull of the conversation, when I ask him what he does and he's at Xbox, immediately in my mind, I'm like, okay, video games, cool, we can talk about that. It is the equivalent of like, I just asked Steve Jobs if he's ever heard of Bill Gates. Like, fucking course, the guy that runs Xbox has heard of every other has heard of. Is intimately familiar with every single video game on the market. I had just heard of Blizzard Gaming and World of Warcraft that morning. I barely was even certain that I had the title right because that whole phone call calling Hot Topic, I was getting messages and then the hotel phone was ringing telling me I needed to go downstairs to get in the shuttle to go to the theater right fucking now and that I was late. So like when I say that I looked up Blizzard Gaming really briefly and then called Hot Topic, that was a total of like 6 minutes or something. I had no understanding at that point. We didn't have phones in our pockets back then that had like the internet on them. The iPhone hadn't even come out. There was no smart screens or real phones. This is like barbaric times in 2006 or maybe it was 2005, I don't remember. I couldn't even remember if I had the name World of Warcraft right. I don't even know if I said it right. And he goes, why? Like, why are you asking? And I said, oh, I just got the sales rights, the exclusive sales rights on all of Blizzard Gaming this morning. He's like, what? And he goes, I thought you owned a sticker company or Sticker Junkie or is that stickers or whatever? And I go, Sticker Junkie is just one of my companies. I just wanted them to do that title at the bottom because then everybody would Google sticker company and use my sticker company. But I also own Delinquent Distribution. I have like 40% of the shelf space in Hot Topic for the joke t-shirts is mine. And then in addition to that, I also have a licensing portion of that company where I license other people's t-shirts. And this morning I have like the license on High Times. And this morning I just retained all of the exclusive sales distribution rights on all of the merchandise, all categories for Blizzard Gaming. So for StarCraft, Diablo, and World of Warcraft, but I didn't even know the names well enough to say all of the names. Never heard of the place. When I signed the contract, did not know what it was very, very, very excited to get the exclusive sales rights, but I didn't know at all how lucky I was in that moment. Not really. And Minecraft, of course, hadn't even come out yet, hadn't even been created. And Jay just looks at me and is like, who are you? Like, legitimately, who the fuck are you right now? He goes, okay, here's what's going to happen next. You are invited. I want you to come up to Seattle and come to Microsoft. I will give you a background tour of all of the back behind the scenes at Microsoft. You and I will hang out together there. I might even give you the exclusive sales rights on all merchandise for Xbox, which, spoiler alert, we did get. Several things are clear to me in this moment. Number one, you are telling me the truth. You really did just get the sales rights on the merchandise for Blizzard Gaming. And I was like, I did. I don't lie like that. And number two, you have no fucking idea at all what that means. You just don't. You have no idea what you're talking about. You do not know anything about video games. I'm like, not anything is a little unfair. I know a lot about Atari 2600. I fucking was boss at Pitfall. Okay, for real. Frogger, Pong, Mrs. Pac-Man. Ooh, come on. But yes, possibly I don't know anything about current video games. Accurate. And he's like, but you just got all of the sales rights. And so whatever magic juju that it is that you have going on, we might want that too. And we really might license Xbox games with you because I don't even understand how you have this. And you don't even know what it is. And I trust that you're going to like really do well with this contract. And I'm like, I am. Said I just sold $4 million worth of stuff this morning. He's like, really? I'm like, yeah. So long story longer, that is how I became friends with Jay Allard. And then when I rolled out a business mastermind group, maybe like a year later, I read this book. This is a fantastic business tip right here. This is a fucking pro tip business tip. There is a book called The Success Principles by Jack Canfield. We are going down a little alleyway here. Don't worry, we'll get back to the finale story, which is almost finished. There is a book called The Success Principles by Jack Canfield. It is one of the best business books even still ever written. It was just updated recently. If you are an entrepreneur, read this book. Every 3 pages is its own little chapter. At the end of every 3 pages, there is like bullet points with actual business exercises that you can implement and do within your own business. What Jack did was he spent like 20 or 30 years reading all of these different business books. Then he picked the best business books out of all of the business books he read. And then he condensed them down into 2 to 3 page chapters of the most important points of what was the most important to him and had them bullet pointed at the end of each chapter so that you could try this in your own company. And one of them was to create a mastermind group. And the exact instructions were something like, you do all the work, you set up the group, you make sure the calls happen, you do XYZ with it. You're the one that makes sure that it happens. And then it said, this is how you get people into the group. Identify the 4 or 5 highest tier people that you know that are going to be a total value add to your business, that are not direct competition, though, to your business. And then ask them in order of likelihood to accept. So I came up with my 4 people, which was Tina Wells from Buzz Marketing, Cameron Johnson, who's an entrepreneur that had just been on a show with Oprah, Dan Caldwell from Tap Out, and Jay Allard from Xbox. Like, that's who I wanted. Then the book said, like, call the one that you know is going to say yes first. And I had just met Dan, super great guy. And something about a conversation that we had let me know that he was really craving more connection with other high tier entrepreneurs also. Because we kind of talked about, like, it's really isolating when you don't know a lot of other entrepreneurs that have really scaled a business. You know, this is 2005. So this is like before it was easy to join a group like Summit. There wasn't a lot of connectivity before that because all of those little groups in the early days of Facebook really helped entrepreneurs to find each other. So anyhow, Dan and I have become friends recently, and he immediately said yes. And Tap Out was the fucking hottest thing out there in like 2006, 2007, whenever it was that I put this group together. Then I called Jay, which is weird. You would think I would call Tina or Cameron because Tina is like a really close girlfriend of mine. I knew she would say yes. And instead, I called Jay, and I'm like, "Yeah, Dan from Tap Out." Oh no, I did call Tina first. Maybe I called Jay last, and I'm like, "It's me and Cameron and Tina and Dan from Tap Out. Like, will you be in the group?" And he was like, "Yes." So immediately, I had this badass fucking baller entrepreneurial mastermind group, and I only did that because of that Jack Canfield book. I actually met Jack like maybe a year later. I went to one of his things and I brought one of the Learning Annex covers because I was the best selling person at the Learning Annex, and I had the full front cover and he had like half of the back cover, and I was like, "Oh, I beat you on this one." And I flipped it around and showed him that he was on the back cover while I was on the front cover, and like asked him to sign it. And I told him that story about the mastermind group. But I will revert back to how sometimes I can just come across as being really socially awkward. It doesn't happen hardly at all anymore, but it happened a lot more when I was in my early 30s. I think that he thought that I like had this made or something. I don't think that he knew at all who I was, or that I had been on the front cover while he was on the back cover of this magazine. Like, he signed it, but I think that he thought it was one of those things that you would like go make in a mall back in the day when you could like walk into a mall and get your picture on the cover of like Time magazine or whatever magazine that you wanted. It was a very strange interaction. And I was trying to like explain to him how much success principles meant to my life, but it didn't go well. We did not stay in contact. So that is how I met Jay Allard and started that amazing mastermind group. And that's just like one teeny tiny example of the very fucking good shit that happened because I was on the show The Apprentice. I have only appreciation and gratitude for having been on that show, even as much as like there was some really shitty parts that went with it too. It made me so uncomfortable when people would just like call and hit me up for money because I had been on this TV show where they're talking about me being a multimillionaire. And so that is just one of the amazing things that happened because of having been on The Apprentice, of getting to meet people like Jack Canfield and tell him my story of getting to be on the front cover of like the Learning Annex. Like, they would not have even known who I was to know to ask me to speak if I had not been on that show. Of very easily getting the introductions to the right people at GameStop or at Target or at any big Fortune 500 that I wanted to have a connection with. Even still to this day, it is impressive to people that I was on The Apprentice like 20 plus years ago. And what's funny to me is that for years and years and years, I just never talked about it. It just never came up. Quite frankly, it never felt like the most interesting thing about my life because I really had done it just to prove to myself that, like, I don't need to be in total control of my life. I can turn things over. It's going to be fine. I can work with people that I don't like. I can be in an environment where I don't control every single little moving part of it. And because I worked for myself basically my whole life, I just had such a high degree of control over every single part of my environment that it was really interesting for me to be in a position where that wasn't the case. And then to just be at the mercy of like however the producers decided to edit me, and thinking that I was going to have attempted murder allegations against me. That was a very hard 9 months while I was waiting for the edit to come out. But then once it started to go on the air, like, it just was fine because I realized very quickly that people may say super fucking inappropriately, ridiculously mean things in the comment section, that anybody that met you in person was always just really nice. And then they would go home that night and say, "I met this chick that was on The Apprentice." That probably still happens when I tell people I was on The Apprentice. "I met a chick today who was on The Apprentice." But that's what I would, if I ran into somebody that was like on The Bachelor. When I saw Hannah Brown at the Milken Institute, I was like, "That is Hannah Brown." She was, well, I actually watched her season of Special Forces, and I only watched it because she was on. She's such a fucking badass. If you have not seen Special Forces, I've only watched one season. I watched the season that Hannah Brown was on, and she once again proved herself just to be fucking badass. I wish we would have connected at Milken. I didn't even know she was there until I saw a picture that I had taken later that she just like happened to be in. It was a picture of something else. Anyway, It was a crazy fun experience. It also was a fun experience to be like a little bit famous in retrospect. And it gave me a very clear perspective that I never wanted to be famous again, except for now that is revised. I like being what, quite frankly, The Apprentice offered me the opportunity to be, which is hotel lobby famous. If I go and speak at a conference or at an event, then when I walk out into the hotel lobby, everyone wants to talk to me. Everyone wants to know who I am. Everyone wants to say hello. And then I walk outside and I jump in my lift and nobody knows who I am anymore. That to me is the exact right amount of fame. But I think we might get a little bit more. If I sell the series, if I sell this show, if I sell the documentary Sticker Wars, then I will have a little bit more fame for a little while. But it's such a weird content economy right now that I feel like you can make it come or go at will. Most people don't remember who was really famous on the internet 10 years ago. It's very easy to fade back into society if you don't want to be famous anymore. At least it seems that way to me. I certainly hope that ends up being the case. But for right now, I am sure glad that you guys are with me on the ride. I am very excited for next week's episode, and I don't know what it's going to be yet, but what I promise you is that if you grab your wine and grab your popcorn, I will bring all of the tea on next week's episode of Andrea Lake 101, The Making of a Billionaire. Until then, have a super lovely week.